Hello everyone, and welcome to this video from BlenderCookie.com. My name is Jonathan Williamson, and today I'm going to give you an introductory overview to the new BMesh modeling system. Many of you are probably familiar with the term BMesh. You may or may not know what BMesh really means, or what's all the big deal, or anything like that. So today I'm going to try and do two things. One, I'm going to try and kind of clarify what BMesh is and how it affects us as modelers in Blender, and then I'm going to give you kind of an introduction to BMesh as far as new or existing tools, how those tools may have changed, and then kind of look at how it affects the actual modeling process and why it is a very good thing. So first and foremost, what is BMesh? BMesh is basically an entire rewrite of the modeling architecture for how modeling works in Blender. Now, I'm not going to get any more technical than that because I know nothing more than that. I'm not a developer, but as a user, I've tested BMesh a lot, and I try to keep fairly up to date with the development as far as what's going on and kind of what it is. And to make it to be short and sweet, BMesh is nothing more than a rewrite of the mesh modeling core in Blender to make it much more powerful and much more extendable. So, first and foremost, what this means is it means NGons. Well, what are NGons? Most of you should be familiar with the basic polygons available in Blender, being triangles and quads. Triangle, of course, is a polygon that has 3 vertices with a face between them. A quad is 4 vertices that make up a face, and an NGon is, well, any number of vertices. So currently in Blender 2.61 and back, 2.61 is the current version as of this recording, Blender does not support anything more than 4 vertices per face. But if you've ever used another modeling software such as, say, Silo or Maya or any other software that supports NGons, you'll know that NGons can be very, very handy. For those of you that are not familiar with them, an NGon is basically a face that can have any number of vertices, such as this face here. So if we go into edit mode here, you'll notice that this face, and it is just a single face, actually has 6 vertices. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Well, this is really cool because it allows us to have a lot more versatility when modeling. And this is one of the things that BMesh allows. And I'm going to give you an example of kind of where we can use NGons, how they're helpful, and some of the things that allows us to do in just a moment. But let me first kind of clarify a couple of things. If you watch any of the BMesh discussions on blenderartist.org, the main Blender forums, you'll know that there's a lot of people, and you may be one of them, and that's completely fine, that either feel one of two ways. One, that BMesh is going to be the greatest thing that has ever happened to Blender, or that BMesh is just blown way out of proportion, doesn't actually mean anything, and people are just getting excited about nothing. Well, to be honest, I think it's actually kind of in the middle. For one, BMesh does not make you change the way that you model. The way that you model can stay exactly the same. You can keep doing absolutely everything that you've been doing for years with the new BMesh system, which, by the way, something I meant to say at the beginning, BMesh is designated to be included in Blender with Blender 2.63 in the next couple of months. So that's the current plan as of the latest Blender developers meeting notes. But anyway, BMesh does not have to change the way that you model, but it can change the way that you model because it makes it more versatile. So myself, I tend to model with a poly by poly modeling technique where I'm extruding an edge or multiple edges at a time, and then I fill in the surfaces. With BMesh, however, I find that some modeling techniques that didn't work with the old mesh modeling tools in Blender are now very versatile and very good with BMesh, and so I've started adapting my techniques a little bit. But this doesn't mean that you have to. On the other side of the spectrum, for those people that are saying that BMesh is the greatest thing to ever happen, and all of a sudden we can use NGons wherever we want. Well, that's not necessarily the case, because in the end, NGons are nothing more than a means to an end, basically. In most cases, particularly if you're modeling for games, or if you're modeling with large amounts of subdivision surfaces or anything like that, your final mesh will most likely and should probably not have NGons in them. Because everything is going to be converted to either triangles or quads at render time. In most cases, always triangles. And so by removing all NGons from your mesh towards the end, it gives you utmost control of how your model is displayed. So an NGon in general, as a good rule of thumb, should not be present in your final model unless that surface of the model is completely flat or you have a perfectly good reason for using it. Those perfectly good reasons generally lie within architectural visualization projects where you're not necessarily using subdivision surfaces and you want very clean surfaces, very clean lines, etc. for displaying to clients. But more about that later. Let's go ahead and look at a quick modeling demo in Blender 2.61 and then in BMesh. So first, in Blender 2.61, if I just go in and I add in, say, a cube, and then I go into edit mode, and let's just say subdivide this cube, say, twice. Cool. Well, now I'm going to go ahead and maybe just extrude this side right here, just extrude it out. But then I decide, oh, actually, I want to subdivide these more because I want to get a really nice rounded surface in here. So maybe I'll go through, select this entire face ring, hit W, and subdivide. Well, crap. I have this really nasty surface here composed of tons of triangles now that I would need to manually remove, because if I were to go in and say, add in a subdivision surface modifier, well, that just looks like crap. Let's look at the same example now in BMesh. So if I create a new file here in BMesh, like this, I add in a cube. And by the way, this BMesh build that I'm using is from graphicall.org, and it's this top one right here, uploaded by Demo Hero just a couple hours ago. Thank you, Demo Hero. And if I then go in, let's just grab the same mesh. We'll hit W, subdivide. We'll do this twice. And then let's just extrude this section. So I'll just extrude that out. And then again, I decide that I want to subdivide this. Well, I can now just hit W, subdivide, and check it out. We don't have all those nasty triangles in here. Instead, what we have are new vertices that have been added, and it's created a large number of NGons right here, where each one of these is now a single face still, rather than all these nasty, nasty triangles. So this is very cool because it makes, oops, there we go. It makes the modeling process far less destructive. And there's a lot of other tools that we can tie in with this. Let's step back a second. Let's look at a simpler example. Let's say we have a cube here and we want to maybe just extrude a circle out of this top. Well, I could maybe go ahead and hit E to extrude, select this face, then I hit W, subdivide, and look at that. Well, we've got all these nasty triangles. Whereas if we look at it in BMesh, again, I will add in a cube. I will subdivide or extrude in this one face. And then I will hit W and subdivide. And look at that. I've got very nice clean surfaces. This surface then, I could go ahead and maybe I'll just get rid of this center vertex, which there's a new tool called Dissolve. I can get rid of that. And then I can select this interior surface and just make it a circle, extrude that straight up, and I have very nice clean lines. Now, if I wanted to go ahead and make this my final model such that I don't have these NGons in here, because again, NGons should not necessarily be in your final model because you want all triangles and quads, particularly for game models, well, then I could just very quickly add in, say, 2 loops right there, and then just go in and connect these lines. Now, fret not if you're wondering how on earth am I doing all this, because I'm going to give you a full overview of some of the tools here in just a moment, but you can see where this then is very, very cool and a much more ideal result than this. Where here, if I wanted to do that same thing, I would need to go in, I need to delete this vertex, then I could spherize that, then I could extrude this up, then I could add in, say, 2 loop cuts here, then I could slowly go through and convert each one of these to quads, and finally get the same result after about 6 times as many key presses, a lot more commands, and a lot more things to remember. And of course, this is a very, very simple example. If this were a much more complex model, that would not have been nearly so cut and dry. So that's the basics of BMesh. The easiest way to think of it is that it's far less destructive. It allows NGons, and it can make altering your topology or your surfaces much easier on the fly. So let's go ahead and look at some real world examples. So these are just kind of crappy little examples that I just did off the top of my head. So let's go ahead and look at two separate models that I've included. And this one under samples here, I have first off a modern building. So this is just modeled off of a building that I found, just very, very simple and modeled fairly quickly. Okay, nothing too fancy, all whatever, kind of cool. But let's go in and look at the actual mesh. If we hit tab to go into edit mode, you'll see that it looks way simpler. You know, if you're used to modeling Blender, then you know that this would just be composed of tons of triangles like that. We would see, you know, tons of triangles all throughout, and it'd just be an absolute disaster. You know, it might look something more like that. Not very pretty. But in BMesh, it's very nice and clean. And this is a prime example of kind of an architectural project that works really, really well with BMesh. So what you can see is I have a single NGon right here for this main face. I've got single NGons for these surfaces here, this surface here, and I can extrude any one of these. I've got a single NGon through here, but you notice it's still all connected. You know, if you wanted to do this previously, you would have to have lots of duplicate vertices, duplicate edges, and just really not a very good result. But on any one of these, I can go in and, you know, if I want to, say, extrude this surface, I can do that. No problem. I can go in and I can extrude this. If I decide, oh, actually, I want to connect these in here, well, I can go in and just connect them just like that, and then I can extrude this. Anything that you want to do very quickly, it's much easier to do in BMesh than it was before. One of the other advantages to BMesh is that it opens up the realm for a lot more modeling tools. Some of you may not be aware, but basically Blender's modeling tools haven't really changed, except for the occasional add-on, but add-ons don't really count. The actual core modeling tools have barely changed in the last 6 years or so. And, you know, I'm sure there's many, many reasons for this, but one of the reasons is simply because all the developers are waiting for BMesh to develop on a much more extendable core. For one, because everything that you do in the old system would just have to be redone once BMesh hits. But so BMesh will also, ideally, it should also open the way for a lot more powerful modeling tools. And so even though we may not see a lot of differences as the actual modeling arsenal goes in this initial 2.63 release, which should be in the next couple months or so, we should also, in the very near future, start seeing a lot more tools integrated. So let me go ahead and give you an overview of some of those new tools that have already been integrated. And I'm going to do this on another real world example. If I go in here, I've got this character daemon base mesh that I'm working on. So this is a model that I'm working on for a competition over at CG Hub, actually. And all of this is initially box modeled, and now I'm going in and working through the topology. So if you look in here, you'll notice that I have a few NGons. So I've got this NGon here, I've got this NGon here, I've got one back here, and this is really, oh, and there's another one right here. And this is really cool because it's, by using the NGon system, it's allowing me to kind of isolate some of the topology and just focus on the areas that I want to without disrupting the rest of the model. For example, if I decide, ooh, I want to add in, say, another edge loop right at the corner of his mouth, but I don't necessarily know how I want to treat that edge loop going on back, you know, around his head. You know, all I know is that I want to go up to here, but past this point, I don't have any idea. Well, since I have an NGon right there, I could just say, hit Control R, add in an edge loop, cut that in, and it just adds it right to that surface. Notice it doesn't add any nasty triangles. It doesn't do anything like that. It's just a single solid face. Awesome. Well, if I then decide that I want to maybe connect, say, this face with another loop right here, maybe I can just add a loop here, and then I decide, wow, this one here and this one here make a really good point where I could connect those. Well, how do I connect those? If you're thinking of the NGon system and thinking of the, you know, the original modeling system, well, you know, normally you would just say hit F to fill that with a line, but you notice that doesn't break the NGon. Now I just have an edge and an NGon, so that's not what I want. Instead, there's a new tool included in BMesh called Vertex Connect. If you hit the spacebar and type in connect, if I can type connect, you can see Vertex Connect. The hotkey is J. So if we just select the two vertices, hit J, it adds an edge it's splitting the NGon, so I now have two NGons, and it's connected those two vertices. So this is very cool because now I can go in and say, all right, well, I want to just say connect those. Whoops, I want to connect that. Maybe I want to connect this. Or, oh, you know what? Maybe I don't want to do that, and I don't like that topology at all. So I could just simply select all of these faces, and if I want to merge them back into an NGon, I can just say hit F to make an NGon, or I can hit X and say dissolve, which is another new tool, and all of a sudden it's merged back into an NGon without destroying any of my topology back here. I haven't made a hole in the model, whereas, if I'd made a hole in the model by just, say, deleting the faces, well, then in order to fill in this area, well, I'd first need to maybe, select some of the faces. Then I could go through, start selecting all these. Okay. And finally now I sort of have a working, oh, no, that didn't work. Looks like I've got an extra face in here that I accidentally added. You can see, this is the way that it used to work. Really kind of cumbersome, slow, not very ideal. Whereas with the NGon system, it's just, oh, okay, connect those. And maybe now I'll connect this. And so you don't have to do anything until you know that's what you want to do. So let's look at a couple other things. One tool that many people have been dying for like ages is a real knife tool. You may remember the knife tool in 2.49 if you've been using Blender for a while, and it was pretty awesome. It was great. It had some good functionality and such, and the knife tool in 2.5, while it exists, it's really just a mediocre substitute. Well, the knife tool in BMesh is now really awesome. It's a little buggy from time to time, but it's definitely on the right track to being awesome. The way that you access it is you hit K, and the first thing to note is that you now have this little hover indicator where if you hover over an edge, the edge highlights, and you have a green box that indicates where you're going to insert a new vertex. One of the other awesome things about the new knife tool is that you can rotate, zoom, you can do whatever you want while using the knife tool. Where in, I believe in 2.49, you couldn't do that. In 2.5, you most definitely can't. Well, now if I say, well, I really want a little extra topology right in here, right in the center of this NGon. Well, I could go in and just say, select the NGon. I could extrude it in like this, and then I can kind of do what I want, but that's not very ideal. Instead, let's just use the knife tool. I can click on that vertex, go over here, over here, over here, and then finally say, maybe I'll connect right here. Hit enter. And now I have an NGon here. I have an NGon here. I can go into vertex select mode. Now I can maybe just go ahead and hit J, connect those. Maybe I'll connect those. I decide that I don't like that vertex. I'll just hit X and dissolve it, and that dissolves there. Or I can say that I want to hit W, do a limited dissolve. Oop, nope, limited dissolve doesn't work there. Instead, I can select the edge, and I should be able to dissolve it. Let's see, if you're in edge mode. Ah, there we go. Okay, so that's something I'll show you in a moment. But you can see how using the knife tool now, I can add in new topology kind of anywhere that I want. Say, okay, well now this is ideal to just connect there. Maybe I would add in another edge loop down through there. Who knows? I could do any number of things. One of the other things with the knife tool, again, if you hit K, you notice that I can insert new vertices kind of anywhere that I want. There you'll notice I got a bug. So the knife tool is a little bit buggy, but it is getting better and better every single day. But you can add in new topology kind of any way that you want. So like that, there we go. Added in a double insert, kind of an inset there. Or if you hit J, now I have a turning point in my topology, just like that. One other thing you can do with a knife tool, if you hold down Control, it will snap to the center of the edge. So I could just say, all right, I'm going to just draw across all these edges. And if you just draw across them, it will cut. Now you'll see it gets a little buggy through there. So sometimes you just need to do it one by one. And I have found that it's less buggy if you hold down Control to snap to the center. But don't really worry about the bugginess because it's actually far less buggy today than it was even just a few days ago when I was first doing this model. And so the bugs are really getting worked out quite quickly. You can also just click and drag, draw across any edges here. And you notice if I just draw across like this, it's basically snapping to the center of all of those edges. So if I just then hit enter, it just draws across those. Very, very cool. Let's see. Yeah, so that's basically those. A couple other tools that have been added. One is a native bridge tool. So let's just say that I want some some horns kind of coming out of his shoulders here. So maybe I would just duplicate this up, something like this, and I've extruded this around, maybe something like that. Okay, so I've got my horns, and I decide that I want to connect these and these. Well, I can just go in, connect these, hit Control E, and we now have bridge 2 edge loops here, but you'll see it must connect edges from 2 edge loops, and this is because it's failing because of these interior vertices. So if I were to select this, hit dissolve, it combines that into an NGon, select this one, dissolve that, and now I should be able to bridge these no problem. And there you go. You will notice it does not currently remove interior faces. That should be an option in the very near future, but to have a native bridge tool now is very, very awesome. The one thing to note is that a lot of the add-ons currently will not work for mesh modeling. Some of them will. Basically, if it involves an NGon, it's probably going to break currently until the NGon has, until the add-on has been updated. But if it just uses the regular mesh system, then it should be fine. But just be aware that it may not work. So there's an example, but let's go ahead. Let me take a step back because I get the feeling that some of you are probably unsure or confused with the dissolve, the collapse, etc. So let's go back to just a very basic example. Let me just add in, say, a cube like this, and I'm going to just subdivide this a few times. All right, so let's look at the new options. Number one, if we hit X, we can see that we have dissolve and collapse, and everything else is then normal. So first, starting with dissolve, what does dissolve do? Well, the first thing to remember is that dissolve will behave differently depending on what you have selected. But in other words, if you have faces, edges, or vertices selected, and that's dependent on the modes, not what you have selected. So for example, if I select these 4 vertices and hit dissolve, it's going to remove all of those vertices. But you'll see that I have this entire face selected. If I go into face mode and hit dissolve, well, it doesn't actually do anything because basically what it's tried to do is remove any interior vertices. Well, those vertices don't exist unless I tell it to dissolve verts, then it will go ahead and remove those. So in other words, it will behave differently depending on which mode that you're in. So in vertex selection modes, I select a vertex, hit dissolve. It dissolves that and creates a single NGon. Happy, happy. All right, if I go into, just undo that, go into edge mode, select a single edge, and hit X and dissolve, you see it just dissolves the entire edge. If I select 2, it dissolves the edges. But again, if I were in vertex mode, it would dissolve that entire area. So basically, it dissolves the element that is selected. So if we do it in face mode, if we select a single face, it doesn't really do anything. If I select multiple faces, it's going to combine those into a single NGon. So you can see if I were to do something like this, I have a single NGon. Cool. All right, so that's dissolve. Let's look at collapse now. If we select a single face in collapse and do, X and collapse, you can see it's basically just done a merge where it has merged them all into a single vertex. Well, this, how is this any different than, say, merge at center? Well, it's not. And actually, collapse is in the previous build of Blender. It's maybe just not quite as useful. If I now say, with collapse, select, say, 2 edges, or let's try a single edge first. If I do a single edge, hit X and collapse, it's just merge those into a single vertex again. If I select 2 edges, hit X and collapse, it's basically merged each vertex of each edge to its adjacent vertex. So it's combined these 2 and it's combined these 2. Whereas if we were to do, say, a W merge at center, it's going to merge those into a single point. If we do faces and hit X and collapse, it's going to basically do the same thing. So really, collapse is primarily helpful with edges. So you can imagine, like, if we have, say, 3 edge loops right here, just like this, and we want to merge, get rid of these 3 edge loops beyond this point, basically, so that we want to merge this into a single diamond. Well, you can see that then if I just hit X and collapse, that will merge those all down. But if I were to go in and select these, like this, so basically it's going to merge or collapse them along the length of the edge. There we go, hit X and collapse. Then it's just collapsed all those together, and then I could go right in, select that edge, select that edge, hit X and dissolve, and now I have two very nice diamond quads. Cool. Okay, let's look at another example. There's another tool that Campbell Barton actually just committed recently that's called limited dissolve, and you can find it by hitting W, and you'll find limited dissolve. What it does is basically with vertices. It's kind of the same as dissolving an edge, but it's for vertices. So it's really more of just a time saver. And basically, like if you have two vertices selected and you hit X and dissolve, it dissolves the two entire verts and then just fills the surrounding area with an NGon. If I select the two vertices and hit W, limited dissolve, it's just going to remove the edges that are connected to it. So it'll just basically remove the edges that are created from those vertices, not the vertices themselves. And then you can also set an angle on that as well, which I was not actually aware of, but you can see as I increase the angle, it kind of removes some of the vertices as well. Not positive on the way that works, but very cool. Very cool. Anyway, so that's basically it. One other thing that BMesh does bring in is a decent, not great yet, but a decent bevel tool, where if I select, say, an edge here, and I wanted to bevel this edge so it goes across like that, well, if I select the edge, hit W, and bevel, you can see what it's done. I can then increase or decrease the percentage. I've got even and distance, so I can adjust those if I want, and I have a recursion level. Now, note that the recursion level is a little buggy with a lot of things. It works pretty well with single edges like this, where then I'm just creating a single NGon right here. Now, if you say do two edges like this, say W and bevel, we can decrease the recursion level there maybe, set it to even and distance, or even. Then you can see that again works very well. But if I do, let's grab a new cube. If I were to do an entire face, hit W and bevel, you'll see it gets a little messier where, okay, that works fine. But if I say do the entire cube, W and bevel, it's still going to create those triangles there, which, I mean, it kind of has to. So I can create those triangles. That's all fine and dandy. But you will find that it's a little finicky at times. Some things don't quite work, particularly if you're doing, say, a bevel like this. Hit W, bevel, increase the recursion level. Then you can see it starts to get pretty messy, where really those probably ought to be evenly distributed, but they're not. But much, much better than the previous bevel, particularly simply for the fact that now we can do a single edge like this is just wonderful. And the recursion level does work very nicely there. So that's just fantastic. And now you can extrude this, you could extrude that in and then go out, and you've got very nice, easy controls. So that's BMesh basically. Again, just to kind of recap, BMesh allows NGons. It gives us a few more modeling tools, and more than anything, it makes the modeling process less destructive while you're going through and you're setting up your topology, you're doing, all the normal modeling stuff. But it is not, the end all of all things in modeling. It is not a godsend by any means. It's not going to magically fix all your topology problems. You still need to know about topology. You still need to know how to construct a mesh well, but it makes the actual construction process a lot easier, flow a lot nicer, and make it so you're not constantly fighting triangles here, triangles there, and in the end, it gives you a much more seamless process to result in a very nice quad-based mesh. A couple examples. Some of you may have seen a model that I released the other day as a Blender Cookie. It was a Blender Cookie exclusive for the rigged version, or I released a version on Blend Swap, which was this female body character base mesh. This one here. And this was modeled completely in BMesh as kind of a test of the new system. And I can tell you that working in BMesh with the new NGon system and a much less destructive system probably saved a good hour off of the modeling time, simply because I was able to just lay down the topology how I wanted without destroying the surface, and then kind of extend it to the other surrounding areas without having to constantly go through, break my topology with triangles, and then recreate it. I could simply just fill in an NGon, work on the area that I wanted, and then extend that area to the rest of it. So in the end, BMesh is fantastic. It's not the magic wand of modeling tools that's just going to make all models awesome. You still need to know what you're doing for sure. You still need to know about topology, and you still need to be comfortable with the modeling process. But once you are comfortable with those things, it's a very, very cool thing. And luckily, we're finally going to see it. It's actually coming in Blender 2.63, maybe 2.64 if things don't go as smoothly as we hope. But in the end, we're going to have it. It's awesome. Enjoy.